We all dread seeing a random warning light on our dash because in most cases, it means we are about to lose our car for a couple of days and our wallet will become lighter. Unfortunately, that's also likely the case with the Ford Escape and its Service Now light. And while the repair itself doesn't have to be too expensive, diagnosing it is quite a nightmare. Ford Escape Engine Fault Service Now light has the same meaning as any other standard check engine light. The ECU, Engine Control Unit, has detected a malfunction in one or more engine systems or components, and to identify it, you'll need to use a scan tool code reader. The meaning of the Engine Fault Service Now light. Even though Ford Escape has a standard check engine light, the Service Now message is there to accompany it. Some might say that the Engine Fault Service Now is more serious, but it's not. The message is there only to get your attention. Still, that's not to say you should underestimate the severity of the problem because a standard check engine light should not be taken lightly either. As already mentioned, the Service Now message can indicate anything from a faulty battery to a cracked engine block. Even worse, it can mean a faulty braking system, transmission, ignition, and other systems that can potentially put you in danger if they fail. Causes of the Engine Fault Service Now light. The biggest problem with the Ford Escape and a couple of other Ford models are that the engine fault message often doesn't store any fault codes. And with no fault codes or other symptoms, it's almost impossible to diagnose and fix. Still, scanning the fault codes remains the first thing you should do. To do that, you can take your car to a local AutoZone store or any other local repair shop. Alternatively, you can buy an OBD2 Bluetooth diagnostic tool and do it at home. However, if the warning message is intermittent and only lights up once a day or once a week, you likely won't find any codes. But in case you don't, here are some common causes that you should inspect and test first. 1. Old battery. An old battery is the most common cause of the Engine Fault Service Now warning light. And the reason why you are not getting a battery warning light instead is that the battery is only beginning to fail. In any case, if your battery is older than 3 years, then that's where you should start. You can take your car to a local Napa or AutoZone store to have the battery tested, or you can do it alone using a multimeter. 2. New battery. Yes, a new battery can also cause the warning message in question. The thing with the Ford Escape and many other modern cars is that batteries have a monitoring system, BMS. One of the main purposes of the BMS is to keep track of battery age and adjust the battery charging system accordingly. In other words, as the battery gets older, the BMS orders the alternator to increase the charging voltage ever so slightly as time passes. However, the BMS can't detect a new battery on its own, and instead, its battery log needs to be reset. If your mechanic fails to do that, the alternator will slightly overcharge the battery, leading to its premature failure and the engine fault warning message. How to reset battery monitoring system, Ford Escape 2013-2019. 1. Turn the ignition on but don't start the engine. 2. Flash the high beams 5 times. 3. Press the brake pedal 3 times. 4. After about 5 seconds, the battery warning light will flash 3 times, signaling that the BMS is reset. 3. Vacuum and boost leaks. A vacuum leak means one or more vacuum hoses are cracked and are letting air into the engine that the mass airflow sensor cannot detect. It can cause intermittent warning lights and several fault codes when that happens, but the most common ones are those related to misfires and catalytic converters, detecting a lean air-fuel mixture. Besides the warning message, you might also notice fluctuating idle, surging when shifting gears, and increased fuel consumption. Finding a boost leak or a vacuum leak can be near impossible without the right tools because there are dozens of hoses and assemblies where it can occur. Not only that, but the crack in a vacuum hose can be as thin as a hair, making it almost impossible to notice with the naked eye. Moreover, many of the hoses are well hidden in the engine bay. To find them, you can either buy one of the above tools or make your own smoke machine like the one in the video below. I have made one myself, and I managed to find all the leaks, plus it cost me under $20. 4. Throttle body failure. Another common problem, however, is also one that's hard to miss because it sends the car into limp mode. Limp mode means the ECU severely impairs the acceleration and top speed as a self-preservation effort. Some other symptoms you might notice are an erratic idle speed, difficulty or inability to start the engine, and poor acceleration. And the corresponding fault codes are P2106, P2107, P2110, and P2135. In case you don't get a fault code, you can have your mechanic test the throttle body. And if it turns out the throttle body needs replacing, which will most likely be the case, you can find one at AutoZone for $180. The labor cost will vary, but on average, it's around $100. That brings the total cost to close to $300. However, you can also easily replace the throttle body at home, and it won't take more than 20 minutes. How to replace the Ford Escape throttle body. First, you need a socket wrench set with a 9mm socket and a flat screwdriver. 1. Open the hood and locate the intake hose between the throttle body and the air filter box. The throttle body sits on the driver's side next to the engine. 2. Unplug the MAF sensor and remove the intake hose. Also, there is another smaller hose attached to the intake, so remove that as well. 3. Unplug the throttle body connector using a flat screwdriver. 4. Unbolt the old throttle body and remove it. 5. Replace the throttle body gasket with a new one. It's usually included in the kit. 6. Install the new throttle body and reassemble everything in reverse order. 7. Start the car and let it idle for a couple of minutes before driving. 5. Cracked engine block. It's not so common that your Escape has a cracked engine block or a leaking head gasket, but it sometimes happens. Certain model year Ford Escapes had engine block issues, but before jumping to conclusions, here are some other symptoms you might have noticed. The first is losing coolant. If your car loses coolant at an alarming rate and there is no puddle under the vehicle, the coolant is likely going into the cylinders. Furthermore, sometimes the coolant will look like it's boiling while the engine is running. That's an obvious sign of a cracked cylinder or a blown head gasket. Lastly, white or blue smoke when first starting the engine, or even while driving, is another dead giveaway. Unfortunately, Ford dealers typically avoid any responsibility over engine block failure, as long as the car isn't under warranty. So the best thing you can do is either hire a lawyer if the car still has relatively low miles. Otherwise, a brand new engine will likely cost around $3,000 to $4,000, while a used one is $1,000 to $1,500 depending on the condition. As for labor costs, you can expect to pay for around 20 to 23 hours. With an average mechanic hourly rate of $75, that brings the total cost to $3,000 with a used engine and around $5,500 with a new one. To summarize what we went over in this video, the Engine Fault Service Now light is essentially a Ford check engine light. When you get that warning message, the best thing you can do is scan the fault codes. Unfortunately, many owners experience the engine fault message intermittently, and a scan tool shows no fault codes. When that's the case, you should first inspect and test your battery, if you have recently installed a new one. Check our guide on how to reset the battery monitoring system. Other than that, test your car for boost and vacuum leaks, and if the engine goes into limp mode when you get the error message, it's most likely a failing throttle body. And lastly, you could be looking at a cracked engine block depending on the production year.